I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood surrounded by woods. It's peaceful most of the time, but nights like this make me uneasy. It was one of those stormy fall nights with the rain pounding hard enough to make it sound like someone's outside. I was home alone. My parents were out of town, and I figured it would just be a chill night of binge-watching TV and ignoring the weather. Around 10 p.m., just as I was settling in, the power went out. The whole house went dark, and for a second, I thought maybe the storm had knocked something out. It wasn't unusual for the power to flicker during bad weather, but it never went out like this. My heart started racing a little. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. I figured I'd just wait it out, but the silence in the house, broken only by the sound of the storm, made everything feel off. A few minutes passed, and I heard it. A knock on the front door. Not a loud banging, but a steady, deliberate knock. My first thought was that it was a neighbor coming to check on me or something, but why would anyone be out in this storm? I checked the time, 10:15 p.m., way too late for a friendly visit. I hesitated, but decided to go see who it was. My phone light guided me through the dark house as I made my way to the door. I stood there for a moment, listening. The wind and rain were so loud it was hard to focus, but then, there it was again. 3 slow knocks. My stomach dropped. I leaned up to the peephole, and what I saw chilled me to the core. A man was standing there, drenched from the rain, his face partially obscured by the hood of his jacket. He wasn't moving, just standing completely still, facing the door. I didn't recognize him, and something about the way he stood there so still made me feel sick. I backed away from the door slowly, not wanting to make a sound. As I stepped back, the knocking stopped. My heart was pounding now, and I quickly debated what to do. Maybe he would go away. Maybe he thought no one was home. But then I heard the doorknob jiggle. I froze. Whoever this guy was, he was trying to get in. I knew I couldn't just stand there. So I moved as quietly as I could down the hall and into the bathroom. It was the only room in the house with a lock that felt somewhat secure. Once inside, I locked the door and sat on the floor, trying to control my breathing. I kept my phone in my hand, and my thumb hovered over the call 911 button, but something stopped me. It was like my brain couldn't process that this was really happening. Maybe he'd give up and leave. For a few minutes, all I heard was the storm outside. It was almost enough to convince me that he was gone. But then I heard it, a creak from the floorboards in the hallway. He was inside the house. I stifled a gasp, clamping my hand over my mouth. My mind was racing, trying to think of a way out. The bathroom window was too small to crawl through, and I had no way of knowing where he was in the house. I couldn't hear his footsteps, just the occasional soft creak of the floor. It was like he was purposely trying to be quiet, stalking through the house. I don't know how long I sat there waiting. It felt like hours. Then, out of nowhere, a loud bang rattled the bathroom door. I jumped, barely managing to keep from screaming. He knew I was in here. He had to. The door rattled again, this time harder, followed by a deep, low voice. "I know you're in there," the man said. My blood ran cold. He pounded on the door harder, and I knew it wouldn't hold for long. In a panic, I grabbed the shower rod and yanked it down, holding it like a weapon. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. The door pounded again, and this time it started to splinter. I had to do something. I had to get out. I threw open the bathroom window, the cold, wet wind slapping me in the face. I knew there was no way I'd fit through it, but I stuck my arm out and waved it, hoping someone, anyone, might see me. My only other option was to make a run for it. The moment the door broke, I would have to fight or escape. The door burst open, and in the dim light of my phone, I saw him, tall, soaked, and smiling in the most twisted way I've ever seen. I didn't wait. I swung the shower rod at him as hard as I could, hitting him in the side of the head. He grunted, stumbling back just long enough for me to push past him and sprint down the hallway. I didn't stop. I bolted for the front door, yanking it open and running barefoot into the storm. The cold rain felt like needles against my skin, but I didn't care. I ran to my neighbor's house, screaming for help. By some miracle, They were home. They opened the door, and I collapsed inside, shaking and sobbing. I tried to tell them what happened, but I could barely get the words out. They called the police, who arrived within minutes, but by the time they got to my house, the man was gone. The cops never found him. There was no sign of forced entry, nothing to suggest anyone had been inside. But I know what happened. I still can't explain it, but I know that man was real, and if I hadn't gotten out when I did, I might not be here to tell this story.